Helen Rutter is an actress, comedian and writer. Listeners to In the Reading Corner will be interested to know that her acting credits include playing Ruby in the theatre adaptation of Jacqueline Wilson's Double Act. She's written and performed her own work, including a play, Funny in Real Life, with her husband Rob Rouse, which premiered at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. They also produced the Date Night podcast. Helen's debut children's book, The Boy Who Made Everyone Laugh, is inspired by her son Lenny, who, like the protagonist, also has a stammer. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Helen into the Reading Corner to discuss the background to this very funny book. Welcome, Helen.
Hi, Nikki. It's lovely to chat to you.
So I've said right at the outset that this is your debut novel, but it's not your first foray into writing. Can you tell us a little bit about your writing background before we get on to the story?
Yes. So I started off as an actress from when leaving university. I got my first job actually was in Jacqueline Wilson's book, Double Act. I played one of the twins on a theatre tour for a year. So that was my first ever job. So maybe I was always meant to be involved in children's literature, who knows? But so from acting, when I had my kids, it was a little bit tougher to go on tour and to do all the auditions that they needed. It didn't quite fit with family life. And so that's when I started writing more. I'd always written stories and diaries and plays and everything that I needed to get out. I'd always written. But at the point where I kind of took a step back from acting, that's when it ramped up a little bit, and I started writing plays. For me, I wrote one-woman shows. I wrote a show about motherhood that I performed, a comedy show, and then I wrote a drama that I did and took to Edinburgh, and I loved it. As soon as I started writing things more seriously, I absolutely loved it. And then when the idea came for The Boy Who Made Everyone Laugh, and I had a realization, oh, this is a book. I've got to write a book. And I'd never really even imagined writing a book before. So it was all really new and really exciting.
Really interesting to hear that, because although it's a debut, it does feel very accomplished in the writing, I think. Anyway, let's turn to The Boy Who Made Everyone Laugh. Now, I know that this connects quite a lot with personal experience, so maybe we should start there.
Yes, it was. The inspiration comes from my son, Lenny. He's nearly 13 now, but when I had this idea a few years ago, he was a bit younger and he stammers, and he's had periods in his life that have been a real struggle with his stammer. As you can imagine, in school, there have been points that he found it incredibly difficult, and we've been to speech therapy, and we've gone through quite a lot with it. And I think as he got slightly older and started to learn how to manage it, we had a little bit more perspective. So that's when I had this idea. He'd been playing table tennis with this little boy who was deaf. And I started to think, how does somebody who's trying to lip read somebody who is stammering, and how is that relationship and that friendship just lodged in my head? And I was like, that is such a gorgeous friendship. And then the idea grew from there, and I realized that this was a story that I really, really wanted to tell.
Did you feel that you had to consult with your son to see that he was happy with you writing this story?
Yes. So I tried to write a chapter a day. And at the end of each day, he would come home from school and I would read it aloud to him. And he would absolutely let me know when I had hit the nail on the head and when things didn't quite read for him. Usually, the things that he would be like, no, were things that basically was me just showing my age. So in the way that kids speak rather than in the stammering. But I think he really got quite a lot out of it, actually, of hearing how much I'd tried to understand his point of view and how he had felt. It made him feel heard and feel understood, and like his story was important enough for me to be writing about every day.
have to say, it's an incredibly funny book. I genuinely did laugh. I laughed at the jokes. I laughed at the situations. And I think that's one of the joys about it. It's not a solemn exploration of this, and the humour feels very genuine. I guess one of the difficult things is getting that balance between laughing with and not laughing at. Were there times when you had to, reassess and think that you'd got that tone right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, in everything I've ever written, that balance between humour and not pain so much, but the tougher side of human existence. I'm really always going to try and strike that balance, because I think that you only have one with the other, and that's what real life is all about. It's about, finding the joy in a painful situation. And so I really wanted to strike that, and that was my main goal. And I think that the times when I did have to readjust certain things, one bit I really remember was at the end, and I don't want to spoil it, but there's a point where he talks about himself in front of people on stage, and it's a big moment. And I had to change that quite a lot, because in comedy, a lot of times people talk about themselves and they put themselves down so that the audience can laugh at them, essentially. And because they're on stage and they are in control, it may feel like that they are empowered and that, they're laughing with them. But in this instance, there was a bit of that scene where it didn't quite feel right. And I needed to change it so that he wasn't just making jokes about himself that people were allowed to laugh at, that he flipped it, and then he was making jokes about the world around him and about other things, external things that weren't just him. So he was allowed to talk about his stammer, and he was allowed to talk about himself in a light way and allow people to feel comfortable with him and with that. But then he had to go beyond, and he had to make people laugh about other things in his world. And I thought that was really, really important. And so that scene changed quite a lot when I had that in my mind.
That is such an interesting point. So even as somebody that's very aware, being on your guard, and that really came across, because he jokes at his mother's expense a little bit as well, doesn't he? And,
and the teachers, I think, get so because he involves other people, it doesn't feel too much like he's allowing people to pick on him in a controlled fashion. I didn't want it to seem like all of a sudden it's okay to laugh at him just because he said it is. I wanted it to feel like he could make you laugh in all manner of different ways, and it doesn't have to be just about his stammer.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the story a little bit further. I mean, one of the things that I really liked was he's a great lister, isn't he? He's got a list for everything. And there's one part where very early on where he describes the different kind of adults. There's the encourager, there's the joker, there's the waiter. What's the one that I've missed out?
It's not the interrupter, but it's the one that tries to finish his sentences.
Reads the mind, that one, isn't it?
Mind reader, yeah.
Tell us about those. And as I was reading, I'm thinking, I'd like to be the waiter, but I really think I'm probably somewhere between an encourager and a waiter. Maybe I have to try a bit harder.
Yeah, I'd say that was definitely me. When Lenny's stammer became clear that it wasn't just, because I think lots of little kids stammer a lot, and then as soon as it carries on a bit later, when we realize that it was actually a stammer, I think I was the same. I was an encourager because you want to help, you want to do something. And I chatted to a speech therapist who said, try not to encourage, actually. And one of Lenny's favorite lines in the book is telling someone to relax when they are clearly struggling is like shouting run faster at someone being chased by a tiger. They would if they could. That was one of his favourite bits. And it really kind of shows that you're doing it more for yourself. If you're telling somebody that it's okay, relax, take your time, take a breath in, actually, they're trying to do all of those things. So I think I try my hardest to be a waiter, but still to this day, after years and years, there is still times where we're human, aren't we? And everybody is just reacting. They're dealing with their own stuff while trying to deal with other people's, and you forget. And I think it's good to have something to aim for.
There's quite a lot about speech therapy in the book. Billy has a monthly visit to a very friendly and kindly speech therapist. Some of the things don't always seem to be that helpful. One thing that made me cringe, that just reminds me of my hate when we do things with children, is to over baby them. There was this thing of the soft cuddly toys. Is this a real thing?
Yeah, that was based on a real thing. Me and Lenny were both hopeful that the softies would be put to one side as he got older, because they did feel a little bit young. And speech therapy was great, and they give you lots and lots of things to try. But I think the realization that nobody was going to be able to take this away, nobody was going to be able to fix this, is quite a big realization, I think, for a kid who thinks that things can be fixed generally. And so I think it was a little bit tough at first. And I think the same thing happens to Billy. He talks about, he had one session of speech therapy and then his stammer vanished for a few weeks, and then it came back again. And so that's the thing. You just can't put your finger on it. It's a very hard thing to understand. But going to speech therapy, I think it's about setting aside a time and a commitment to acknowledging it, and to putting in some practice and putting in some work to try and find ways that help you around it. And I'm sure that lots of it didn't work, but then lots of other things did make their way into his head, and he uses them now.
So the story starts just as Billy is about to start secondary school. And he's chosen to go to a different secondary school to most of his primary school friends, because he hopes it will give him a fresh start. There's a teacher there called Mr. Osho, who I loved him so much, because you've created this very positive teacher who just really seems to do the right thing. Tell us a little bit about him and how he helps Billy.
He's great, isn't he? He's kind of the teacher that you really hope your children have a Mr. Osho in their life, because he sees, I think, through their mutual love of music. So Billy's a drummer, and Mr. Osho has an absolute love for music, particularly jazz music. And so they connect over that. And I think he has a gentleness about him, that he is a natural waiter, actually. And he offers Billy some routes. So he offers him the route of, he gives him a notebook and asks him to write anything down in there that he feels that he would like Mr. Osho to know. And Mr. Osho says, is there anything that I can do? And if there is anything at all, then I'll do it. And so when Billy does ask him to make changes and he does them, there's a safety and a trust, I think, between them that starts to grow. And I think that Mr. Osho had a bit of a tough time when he was a little boy at school as well. And so I think he sees a bit of himself in Billy, and he just wants to keep that spark in Billy. He wants Billy to keep hoping and to keep kind of having enough confidence, no matter what else is going on around him, he doesn't want him to let go of his humor and his himself. He wants him to keep hold of that little bit that just makes him Billy.
He's also a noticer, and he notices more than he's actually told, and lets Billy know that as well. Anyway, we could come to that in a moment, because I want to talk a little bit about William Blakemore, the other child who's quite important in this story, who could have been a really awful villain, but again, there's a very sensitive way in which you handle him. Tell us a little bit about that boy.
Yeah, so it started off, he was a villain actually at first. For a lot of the drafts, he kind of remained a villain throughout, and then through editing and reworking it, we needed more of a journey for him. And he is the bully, you know, and he's really cruel, and he doesn't hold back. It's not a tame bully. It's not a bully that, you know, just says the occasional mean thing. He's really quite full on, and it's the kind of person who could really ruin your experience of secondary school. And again, Mr. Osho notices that things aren't quite right there, and he forces them both to basically spend time with each other and see each other. And William Blakemore struggles, finds it incredibly challenging, can't understand most of the subjects that he's being asked to do, and that, along with his home life, means that he is, you know, lashing out in other ways, so that when they're placed together and they have to work with each other, very slowly they start to make little moments and little connections, and it grows to what you can imagine may become an understanding and possibly even a friendship by the end. So yeah, there is a journey there. I wanted to move it on from being a one-note character to having a little bit more of his own story.
So one of the things that the children have to do quite early in their secondary school career is to give a talk about themselves, and quite understandably it's something that Billy is dreading. He comes up with all kinds of excuses or potential excuses as to how he's going to get out of this, but ultimately he has to take part in the activity. And you're going to read us a little bit from the story, aren't you?
Yes. So this is what Billy calls the me speech, because Mr. Osho has asked them all to bring something in that will tell Mr. Osho what makes them them. So Billy calls it the me speech. And yeah, as you say, he absolutely does not want this to happen. But when all his options have run out and he can't find another way out of it, he ends up coming up with a plan. And this is the moment when that plan comes to fruition. Yasmin Ori is up before me. She's brought in a photo of her family and is talking about how important her friends are, how they are like her family too. Then she makes a heart shape with her hands at the end. The girls all whoop and clap. I'm sitting with my cardboard between my knees, still trembling with fear. I wish my name wasn't Plimpton. It means I'm always near the end of the register, so I have longer to worry. Mr. Osho waits for Yasmin to sit down and then says, "Next up is Billy." He gives me a little wink and starts a round of applause. I stand up and slowly go to the front. I avoid looking at William Blakemore. No plan, however good, will stop him from making me nervous. Instead, I focus on Mr. Osho and Skylar because they're smiling at me. I take out my favourite joke book, 999 Jokes for Kids, and hold it up for the class to see. Then I raise my first sign. In big chunky letters, it reads, "My name is Billy Plimpton, and I have a stammer." I see my hand shaking like it doesn't belong to me. I put down the card and pick up number 2 and then number 3. I brought in a joke book. I love jokes. The room is so quiet. 5 more signs to go. Unfortunately, I can't tell you one today. It's hard to tell a joke when you can't get to the end of a sentence. I hear a couple of the girls say, "Aw," and "bless him." The end. I bow and then hold up the last 2 signs. Now you clap and cheer. They're doing it. They're actually clapping. And somebody whistles. I look at Mr. Osho. I'm worried that he'll think I've cheated, that my signs are only showing and not telling, that he'll ring my mum and tell her that I didn't speak. But he has a huge smile on his face, and I know it's okay. I hold up my final sign, and I become the coolest kid in school. Everyone laughs hard at the last sign, and I take another bow and go back to my seat. Alex holds his hand up for a high five, and then Josh and Matthew do the same. My head's fizzing and my ears are getting hot. It feels good though. People really laughed. I'm almost relieved. I don't have to hide my stammer anymore.
I love it because it's a really positive moment, but it's reasonably early on in the book. It's not the end of his journey, but it shows that there are positive moments along the way as well, which I think is really important. There's another character that I'd like to ask you about, and that's Granny Bread. What is it, do you think, that makes grandparents such a comfort and really good confidants in children's literature?
I think it's because they are in real life, isn't it? I mean, Granny Bread is, so we've got a Granny Bean. So Granny Bread is very much taken from our Granny Bean. And I think there's something about having somebody that is connected to you. So they're family and they're close and they're older, but they aren't strict. They don't have the same need to control as your parents do. They're not as distracted maybe and busy often, and I just think that there's a real comfort and there's a real sense of safety in somebody that's that much older and that is still really connected to you.
She's a lovely character, and like you say, it certainly bears out my experience of what grandparents are like in life too. Helen, I'm wishing you all the best with The Boy Who Made Everyone Laugh. I'm wondering if you're working on a second story now, and is it one that draws on family experience if you are?
Yes, I am. I'm trying to, although homeschooling is proving difficult to get on with writing, but I really am trying. So I've got a very rough first draft of my next book, which I'm working on. And I mean, anything I ever write will draw on my life. You know, I'm not the kind of person that can completely remove myself and create things from nothing. So yeah, a lot of it is based on my childhood actually. And this one it's a little boy and he's going through a tough time and his wishes start coming true, and he's not sure whether they really are coming true or whether it's a coincidence. And so the book follows him trying to find out if these wishes are real or if somehow he's making them happen.
Ooh, something else for us to look forward to. But actually, before we do that, The Boy Who Made Everyone Laugh is due out in February 2021. So just a few weeks to wait and everybody will be able to read this for themselves. Thank you so much for joining us in the Reading Corner today, Helen.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
In the Reading Corner is presented by Nikki Gamble and produced by Alison Hughes. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please do leave a review for us. To find out about other projects, including an audience with events and the Exploring Children's Literature Summer School, visit www.exploringchildren'sliterature.uk. Join us again soon in the Reading Corner on your favourite podcast platform.